In a small Viking village, under a sky filled with the roar of thunder, a great warrior named Theodore stood tall, his armor drenched in rain. The enemy's forces were relentless, and the village had been reduced to ashes. Theodore's brothers in arms had fallen one by one, but he refused to let their sacrifices be in vain. His sword was heavy, his limbs were tired, yet he faced the oncoming storm of warriors with an unyielding resolve. As the battle raged, Theodore fought like a tempest, cutting down one enemy after another. His mind was filled with the promise he had made to his dying father: never let the Viking spirit die. In the heart of the chaos, Theodore was struck down by an enemy spear, and as he fell, he whispered his vow once more: "I will not die." Theodore's body lay lifeless on the ground, but his spirit wandered through the halls of Valhalla, guided by the ancient gods. The great warriors of the past greeted him with respect, yet there was sadness in their eyes. "You are not meant to rest here, Theodore," the god Odin spoke, his voice like thunder. "You have a vow to fulfill on earth." Theodore stood tall and firm, his soul burning with the desire to keep his word. "I will not let death claim me," he declared. "I will return to my people and protect them, no matter the cost." Odin's gaze softened, and he raised his hand to the heavens. "Then return, warrior. But remember, even you cannot defy the will of fate forever." Theodore's body, lifeless on the battlefield, began to glow with an ethereal light. In the blink of an eye, he was standing once more, alive and unscathed. The enemy soldiers, who had thought him dead, looked in shock as Theodore swung his sword, defeating them with newfound strength. The warriors who had once surrounded him, now gone, had no idea what had happened. As Theodore stood victorious, he knew that something had changed within him. The spirits of Valhalla had granted him life again, but for what purpose? He could feel the weight of his vow pressing upon him. "I will protect my people," Theodore swore. "Even if I must stand alone." With his renewed strength, Theodore sailed across the great sea, leaving behind the village that had once been his home. The waves crashed against the sides of his longship, and the wind howled through the sails. He journeyed far and wide, seeking knowledge and answers about his return to life. What was the true cost of defying death? On a distant shore, he met a wise old seer who told him, "Theodore, you are a warrior who has crossed the line between life and death. But remember, the more you fight against fate, the greater the price you will pay." Theodore's heart grew heavy, but he could not abandon his vow, even if it meant facing an unknown destiny. Theodore returned to find his village once more threatened by invaders. His heart sank as he saw the smoke rising from the rooftops, and the cries of his people reached his ears. The battle had begun, and once again, Theodore stood at the front lines, ready to protect them. This time, however, his strength was not enough to turn the tide. As the enemy overwhelmed his people, Theodore found himself once more on the edge of death. But this time, he was not alone. The spirits of fallen warriors appeared beside him, their presence giving him strength. "Fight, Theodore," they urged. "Fight for your people, for the vow you made." In the heart of the battle, Theodore faced the leader of the enemy forces. A towering warrior, clad in black armor, challenged him to a duel. Their swords clashed, sending sparks flying into the air. Theodore was exhausted, his body aching from the previous battles. But his spirit burned with the need to protect his people. The duel raged for what seemed like an eternity, but Theodore's strength began to fade. His movements grew slower, and the enemy leader struck him across the chest. As he fell to his knees, Theodore felt the familiar pull of death once more. Yet, as his blood soaked the ground, his vow echoed in his mind. "I will not die." Just as Theodore's vision blurred and darkness took hold, the Valkyries appeared, their wings glowing with golden light. They lifted him from the battlefield, carrying him away from the realm of death. "Your vow is not yet complete, warrior," they whispered. "The gods have decided that you shall return once more." Theodore's body was healed, his wounds closing as if they had never existed. The Valkyries set him down gently on the shore, where the sea met the land. "You are a warrior without equal," they said. "But you must face the truth, even the strongest warriors must one day rest." Theodore nodded, but his resolve remained firm. He would not rest until his vow was fulfilled. On a quiet night by the sea, Theodore sat alone, contemplating the path he had chosen. The winds whispered to him, carrying the voices of the gods. "Your time is running out, Theodore," they warned. "You cannot defy death forever." But Theodore refused to listen. His people needed him, and he could not abandon them, not when they still depended on him. The truth, however, began to weigh heavily on him. The more he fought against death, the more his body deteriorated. He could feel his strength waning, his limbs growing weaker. "What is the cost of my vow?" he asked the winds, but they remained silent. Theodore knew the time was coming when he would have to face the consequences of his defiance. The enemy returned for one last assault, more powerful than ever before. Theodore stood alone at the gates of his village, his sword in hand, ready to defend it with his life. The weight of his years, the countless battles, and the toll of defying death all seemed to press down on him. But still, he fought with a fury that only the bravest warriors could understand. As the battle wore on, Theodore knew he could not fight forever. He could feel his strength slipping away, and yet, he refused to surrender. His people needed him. He had vowed to protect them, and he would die trying. In the heart of the final battle, Theodore faced the enemy's leader once more. This time, Theodore's sword was heavy, his movements slow and labored. He knew that this was his last stand, the moment where his vow would either be fulfilled or broken forever. The enemy leader struck a fatal blow, and Theodore fell to his knees, his vision dimming. As he lay there, surrounded by the bodies of his enemies, Theodore felt a sense of peace. The spirits of Valhalla gathered around him, their voices soft and comforting. "You fought with honor," they whispered. "Your vow is complete." And with that, Theodore closed his eyes, knowing that his duty had been fulfilled. Theodore's spirit rose from his broken body, the battle fading into the distance. He was greeted by the gods themselves, who smiled upon him with pride. "You were a warrior beyond compare, Theodore," Odin said, his voice filled with approval. "You kept your vow until the end. Rest now, for your journey is complete." Theodore stood tall, his heart full of both sadness and relief. He had given everything for his people, and now it was time for him to join the fallen heroes in Valhalla. His spirit was at peace, knowing that he had done all he could. Though Theodore had passed into the afterlife, his village prospered in the years that followed. His legacy lived on in the stories told around campfires, in the songs sung by the bards. The people remembered him as a warrior who refused to die, who fought for his people with every ounce of his being. The village flourished, and the generations that followed Theodore honored his vow to protect their home. The gods, watching from the heavens, smiled upon them, knowing that Theodore's spirit had left a lasting impact on the world of men. As time passed, the people of Theodore's village learned a lesson that would stay with them for generations. They knew that no warrior could defy fate forever, no matter how great their strength or courage. Theodore had taught them the value of standing strong in the face of adversity, but also the importance of understanding the limits of one's own power. The elders passed down the tale of Theodore's vow, warning the younger generations to never take their strength for granted. "Fight with honor," they said, "but remember that even the mightiest warriors must one day rest." In the halls of Valhalla, Theodore sat among the greatest warriors of all time. His name was forever etched into the stories of the gods, and his legacy lived on in the hearts of those who heard his tale. Though his battles were over, his spirit would never fade. He had earned his place among the eternal heroes. As Theodore gazed out over the fields of Valhalla, he knew that his vow had been fulfilled. He had protected his people and kept the spirit of the Viking warrior alive. And though his mortal journey had ended, his spirit would forever be remembered. The moral of Theodore's tale is simple yet profound. Courage and loyalty are powerful, but even the bravest warriors must learn when to let go. Theodore's vow to never die, to protect his people, was his greatest strength and his greatest burden. He taught the world that true heroism lies not in defying death forever, but in knowing when to fulfill one's duty and rest. For even the mightiest warrior must one day face the end.